Good evening, fellow rugby lovers, fellow All Blacks lovers, Fiji rugby lovers, and hey, you might be a lover of any other country, but welcome. It's a frosty Sunday evening, and don't mind me, I've got a bit of the sniffles, but let's get on with this video. It's been a long time between breaks, so it's good to be back. Well, so what I'm going to do tonight is going to try something different. I'm going to talk about Fiji rugby because it's timely. It's been a long time, and after today's performance, I think it's very timely that I did discuss my observations of the Fiji rugby. Yet also, once I finish up with this video talking about today's game against the Wallabies, I shall go ahead and post up a video about what I believe is good and what is not so good with Fiji rugby, and that's going to include the Fijian Drua. So yeah, without further ado, let's discuss today's game against the Wallabies. What can I say? There's nothing I can say that's new, that hasn't been said. It is the same thing all over again. And you know what? Just on the back of what I am about to say, I've just remembered there's something else that the Fijian rugby team does struggle with. And so I've got a couple of pinpoint areas that I believe the Fiji rugby, it has been their problem. It's been their issues for a long time, and today was not any different. The world, in the world of rugby, knows Fiji produces individual talents, fantastic players, but what they cannot do is deliver as a team, deliver as a unit, deliver as a collective on the field. Now, I am of the view that you can put the world's best coaches, you can put the world's best coaching staff in place to coach Fiji and coach the national team, but they're going to fail. It's not going to be as successful. It's not going to be consistent because there are many things that the Fijian players' mentality and a lot of the understanding of the game, the technical, the strategic side of the game that Fijian players as a collective need to understand before they can actually deliver on their individual skill sets. Now, this may sound like a mouthful, but I will break it down. But what I believe, like right now, they've got a very good coach coaching them, and that's Mick Byrne. Mick Byrne traditionally has been a very strategic type of coach, which is like what most coaches are these days. They like to, coaches like Mick Byrne, they like to drill a team around fundamentals, around particular plays. You know, they do quite a bit of analysis work around the opposition's weakness. So Mick Byrne isn't any different. But what I do like about Mick Byrne is that Mick Byrne tries to foster individual talent. But where all of this comes unstuck is Fiji rugby's, and that's most players. It starts at ground root levels, grassroots, and that is getting the fundamentals right. Now, Fiji, the reason why Fiji rugby is so good, they are so consistent on the sevens scale, right? On Fiji sevens, on the world scale. Fiji tends to be every person's second favorite team if they're not Fijian. And if you're Fijian, you bleed Fiji rugby. Now, Fiji rugby in the sevens is so good, so prolific, so prominent. It's because it's unstructured. There's not a lot of emphasis on technical abilities. There's not a lot of emphasis on strategic, on a strategic approach to the game. There's not. It's just all unbroken. You see, so Fijian players, they thrive on that. They thrive on an unstructured game, especially around rugby union. It's just like, playing beach rugby. So this is why Fijian players and Fiji rugby thrives. But when you try to translate that into a 15 side, which is more technical, which is more where there's more onus on the referee. Well, not necessarily the onus, but there's more involvement from a referee. It's a lot of this. Now, rugby union has always been a very technical and a very strategic game, but that does bring a lot of grey side. And I've told this many times. I tell this to many people who I speak to. That's the fundamental difference between rugby union and rugby league. Rugby league is a very good exponent of you play the game as you see it. There's a referee, and the only time a referee gets involved in a game or shows their presence in the game is by how they officiate the game, and that's on crystal clear decisions, whether there are penalties or whether a referee is too heavy on the whistle or not, that does bring a lot of debate around bias and favoritism. But as a whole, the game of rugby league is very black and white, which is why as a product it is always prospering. But where it fails is the governance of rugby league. I mean, unfortunately, they haven't been able to move away from the meathead mentality, and that's all the way from the top. It's unfortunately there's a perception of rugby league being governed by individuals that don't have no IQ and no intelligence. They don't have business acumen. And you know what? To a certain degree, I agree. But that's a separate conversation. That's a conversation for a different time, different place. Now, where I believe Fiji rugby fails is that, look, I've got a couple of notes. All right. First, and this is what I've noticed with the game today, and it's history repeating itself. Now, although we went down to Australia 21-18, it was a lot closer, and for once we didn't get thrashed, which is fantastic. But what I was able to identify, and it always happens, is that starters, fundamentals of the game. All right. Now, fundamentals of the game, there are a few non-negotiables in rugby union, which any team must always uphold. For example, scrummaging. For example, turnovers. For example, lineouts. Okay. Now, I seen us getting pinned today when it comes to scrummaging. Okay, when it comes to your typical scrum, just the foundation of the scrum, like these things, they are non-negotiable. I mean, you're an international team at an international scale. You see, this is a mindset. This is a technical mindset. And look, I understand, Mick Byrne is probably trying his hardest, what can I say? Is that there's a lot of things prior to coming to an international setup that Fiji does not have, and that is infrastructure, that is the financial backing. Yes, at a government stance, the government is the one that takes care of Fiji rugby, and we can sit here and moan and groan until the cows come home that there's so much corruption, which there is. There is too much mismanagement with funding. Yes, correct. So if Fiji wants to become a big team and actually finally break into the top four and consistently break into the top four, there's a lot of things that they need to clean up and they need to address and they need to reset. And one of the things is, like I said, fundamentals, IQ of rugby. All right. The Fijian players, they tend to do things that it's just fails on common sense. It's like in-game management. Like, for example, if an opposition team is rushing you and you're going for touch, right? Use your common sense. Jink the player, step the player, open up the ground, open up the room, and then kick. Why do you have to be one transitional? Like, it's like you need to be able to use your own acumen, your own intelligence to be able to do things. You got the flair. You need the intelligence. You need the IQ. They have it, but they just haven't been trained. They haven't been able to develop that. There needs to be a lot of development around that. Game management. Some of the best players, some of the best teams, they have a very good, prominent game manager. In-game manager, people that know how to read the game. Fiji doesn't have that. Discipline. Rugby union is so technically disciplined game. You need to be disciplined, okay? Fiji, unfortunately, they have a branding and their perception always precedes them, and that is ill discipline, and you need to, if you do not want to get pinned for things that you are known for, then you need to be able to come to a game where it doesn't, now, the mentality and the mindset of discipline, being disciplined, does not change overnight, but you must start somewhere. And then that takes the referee out of the game. You see, rugby union can be very much controlled, and there can be a lot of addressing. There can be a lot of interference, interference of referees in the game, and that's that grey area, you see, and referees interpret the game individually a lot different to every other referees. It's not like it's a blanket black and white rules like rugby league, you see, so it's all up to the discretion of the referee. So if Fiji rugby, if the national team, if they've got this branding, or if they've got this perception that follows them that they're very ill-disciplined, etc., etc. So what do you think is going to happen? What's going to be in the mind of the referee? Today's referee, the French referee, excuse me, I can't pronounce his name. But you see, he was very, very strict on almost every non-negotiable aspect of rugby union. And guess what? 9 times out of 10, Fiji got penalised. You see, now you're telling me the referee, albeit, there were some, calls that could have went the other way, Fiji got done with a rub of the green. But that's the thing. You, as a team, change and shift that perception of a referee. You need to be able to do that. You, as a team, if you address that and if you become technically savvy and technically astute, referees do not have that option but to hone in on that. So you're taking the game away from the referee, and you need to be able to do that consistently. So what I believe from today's game, and this will also overlap into my next video, but from today's game, what I found, and it always seems to be time and time again the same issue, and that is Fiji, they lack the fundamentals. It really annoys me. They don't have the IQ, in-game IQ, right? And the in-game game management, failing on that, right? And then the other biggest thing is discipline. The non-negotiables of discipline. They need to be disciplined, okay? And yeah, and then, and that's how you take the referee out of the game. And the only person that I do see, also on top of that, just quickly, I need to mention is that there's one player who I'm a big fan of, but he needs followers with him, and that is Tevita Ekanivere. Okay, now I've met him. I had the privilege of meeting him. Very well spoken in English. And on top of that, he actually knows the game. He knows the game. He knows how to read the game, right? And yeah, he needs players to be able to follow him in that regard. He's very well spoken in English, and and I'm a big fan of him, and he asks the questions where he needs to ask them, so there needs to be more players like him with that mindset. But anyways, that's my video about today's game. Thank you. This is Junior. See you in the next video. Thanks. Mode.